أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear viewers of the show, think about it. Today we're going to be talking about something that impacts everyone. And when I say everybody, I mean from parents to children to actual professionals who are working as well. Yes, dear viewers, we're talking about the school culture. Culture is something that can be described in different ways and different manners. Today, you're going to understand exactly what aspect of culture we're discussing by a small story that I'm going to share with you. This story is about a young boy by the name of Tayyib. Tayyib is studying in a school. He's in grade 5, I believe. And within class, as most young people do, as I did myself, and I'm pretty sure a lot of our viewers have done as well, you misbehave at times. And misbehavior has a variety of meanings as well. There's a hierarchy. There's an extreme level of misbehavior, and there's a very minimal level of misbehavior as well. So Tayyib was probably caught talking to his friends, using bad language, something of the sort that was unacceptable during class. When the situation took place, Tayyib's teacher had given him a warning. After a few minutes, Tayyib persisted with the same behavior, to which another warning was given. When time came and Tayyib did the behavior and indulged within misbehaving again, the teacher asked Tayyib to stand up and follow him outside the class. They went to the student counselor. When they came to the student counselor, Tayyib's teacher said that we need to talk to his parents. So, long story short, the father comes to school. When the father comes to school and asks Tayyib's teacher what had happened, as soon as Tayyib's teacher starts explaining the situation to the father cuts the teacher off in the middle and starts saying that he's just a young boy, this is what boys do, boys will be boys, what are you talking about, I don't understand, you don't know how to manage your own class, and started coming up with complaints against the teacher. Now Tayyib was present during this little discussion, argument, whatever you flavor or term you want to give it. Now I want to end the story here so we could take away something. I might have mentioned this in previous shows, but let's nib it right on the bud. When Tayyib has seen that his father took his side, or that his father was simply frustrated, all of a sudden the stature of the teacher, the status of the teacher, the position of the teacher was compromised. From being someone who is an educator who should have some form of autonomy, that means some form of freedom, they came down to zero. Bringing somebody down to zero means that you've just given that child who witnessed this a license to misbehave. So now Tayyib knows that whenever he misbehaves, worse come worse, his father or mother will be called to school, and guess what? They're going to start yelling at the teacher. And if that happens, what do we have to worry about? What is the takeaway? What has happened here? Let's say that Tayyib's father came to school and heard the teacher out completely, and then looked towards Tayyib, scolded him, explained to him, and said that if you continue this type of behavior, there will be consequences. Maybe yell at his child. Sometimes people even discipline their children in front of teachers, or take the teacher's side, or not just take the teacher's side, but understand the situation in its entirety and act accordingly. In that scenario, the child would understand how to behave and would think twice before misbehaving in at least that teacher's class. What I want to take away from this is that culture of schools, upbringing, children, students has changed. Before the turn of the 21st century, I'm talking about before the 2000s, we're talking about the 1990s, 80s, 70s, before that, the entire 18th century, and probably before that too, from the 18th century to the 19th to the 20th to the 21st. Now, I remember very vividly when I was studying in university and we were studying about education, we were studying about methodology, we were studying about trends, we were studying about culture. One thing that spoke to me in culture was that how things have changed completely. many people who are authorities over education, I'm not going to take any names, but authors, people who do their research when it comes to education, people right now who are well in their 50s and 60s, who've done research over a long line of 30 to 40 years. They have stated that back in the day, I'm talking about the 80s, 90s, prior to that too, when education used to take place, a huge chunk of education was mannerism. Mannerism means behavior. You might have heard of stories where students were disciplined in a certain way by their teachers and their principals at school a long time ago. Now, as questionable, debatable, or even horrific as those methods were used, whether they used to beat children using sticks or rulers or something like that, to yelling at them and giving them some form of consequence if they didn't behave, to today. Now, behavior, what does behavior mean exactly? I've talked about this in previous shows as well. I've had wonderful guests on the show. There have been people who are educators, people who are in physical education as well. And mashallah, they've had a lot of great input on the show, and we thank them for being on the show and, having that relationship with us that we can call them up again, inshallah, in the future. But before we get into that, behavior basically means that you're able to conduct yourself as a human being that is respectful in the eyes of others or in the eyes of society. Being Muslims, alhamdulillah, we have certain things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made very clear for us within the Holy Quran, within the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we need to follow, we need to understand. What ends up happening quite often is that we misbehave. We'll be sitting down with friends, we'll be making fun of somebody else. We'd be prejudging situations. We'd hear about an issue that happened and we'd be coming up with assumptions on why that issue happened. These are not signs of good Muslims, by the way. You're not supposed to judge, yet we've forgotten to do that. Back in the day, when a teacher used to walk into the classroom, the students used to stand up and greet the teacher. When a teacher used to talk, students used to be quiet. Yes, there's always this abnormal, sometimes happening, talking with your friends while the teacher is talking, but you'd come back on track the moment the teacher's attention would come to you, and the moment at least when you'd realize that the teacher's looking at you or that you could get into trouble. These were issues back in the day. Today, students are getting up from their seats, walking around in class, replying back to teachers, talking to them as though there's no consequence involved. The teacher asked them a question, why aren't you doing this? Because I don't feel like it. There's a story of a student who was misbehaving in class and the teacher asked them to stand up. And the student replied, no. When that happens, this goes to show you that there's something wrong with the upbringing. We have changed and diverted all of our priorities when it comes to education. Education has a huge part of upbringing. Education isn't just formal academic stuff that you learn. That's why we call it academic education, we call it cultural education, we call it traditional education, we call it upbringing education. These are all actual terms given. And they're given for one reason, that all of them come under the umbrella of education. When parents send their children to school, they're not just looking for good grades, at least I hope they're not just looking for good grades. You're also looking at somebody to become a model citizen, a law-abiding person. The moment misbehavior takes place and it raises too much and it reaches a peak, start thinking about this child, this student, as an individual. If in school they misbehave and get away with it, what would happen at home? How would they react, respond, and converse with their parents? What would happen to this individual when they grow up? When they have to go out to university, when they have to go out to find a job, find work, how would they deal with people? You can't carry on all that being reckless with things. Because believe it or not, in school, you're a child. Your parents can come and have your side and have concerns and complaints. But the main aspect of education in school is that parents and teachers are one team. And they need to know that they're one team. They need to know that they're supposed to support one another. Nowadays, quite a popular trend, and based on statistics coming out of almost 70% of Western universities, I'm not saying 70% of universities within a country. 70% of Western universities, that means we're talking about an entire continent or continents, states that behavior is not looked upon or looked after in primary education up until secondary education, right before students have to go off to university and college. It's not looked upon. Students are way too open, they're way too forward. There's nothing wrong with being confident, but there's something wrong with being misbehaving. You talk back in three situations. When you're having a conversation with somebody and you're replying to a conversation, and you're replying to a question, that's not talking back. Talking back is when you know that the person who's talking to you, who's elder to you, could be your teacher, your parents, your older sibling, your grandparents, your uncles, your aunts, is when they show a sign of disappointment. When you can see disappointment in someone's face and they're talking to you, the best thing to do is keep quiet and take it in, because you'll learn something from it. The second scenario is when they're giving you advice, they're giving you some form of guidance. Yes, the guidance might not be useful to you. Yes, you might not use it at all. You might think it's useless. But you need to provide the respect to the person to be able to listen to what they say. Because if you're unable to do that, that means there's a serious issue. The third scenario is when there's a hike of emotion. When an elder person is talking to you, someone who's older than you is talking to you, and you could see a hike of emotion, whether it be anger, whether it be sadness, whether it be some form of frustration, whatever it is, if there's a hike of emotion when someone's talking to you, if they're your teacher, well, in this scenario with school culture, we are talking about teachers, but even with your parents, even with your siblings, with your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents, when they're talking to you with a hike of emotion, do not respond. Because once you do that, yes, indeed, you have talked back and you've shown disrespect. The only advice that is suitable to give at this time is to ask these young people, how do you want others to treat you? I'm sure everybody wants to be treated with respect, to have a conversation where people listen to them, to value their opinion. That's what we talk about. That's what leadership is. And that comes within school culture as well. I'll get to it in a minute. So act the way you want others to act with you. If you want to see some change, you have students who are making fun of another student. They're laughing, they're high-fiving each other, they're coming up with weird noises in the middle of the class. As soon as that student says something back, they're like, huh? What did you say? They don't have the patience, nor the maturity, nor the understanding. They can dish stuff out. That means they can let it out, but they can't accept anything. This is a sign of immaturity. This is a sign of lack of upbringing, lack of respect, lack of behavior. Yes, it's true, behavior and all this starts at home. But if it didn't happen at home, or if the parents tried and it wasn't successful, and now you're going to school, give the school an opportunity to do something too. But it brings me to the school now. Because the culture has changed, schools don't look at behavior either. You have a student who misbehaves, they're taken to the principal's office, principal says, okay, fine, go to class and do this, looks at the teacher, you should do better management. You can't cut a teacher's arms and legs off and expect them to walk. If you tell a teacher that you can't cut marks because of behavior, you can't do this because of behavior, you can't do that, it's only about their coursework, what they're doing, and that's about it. What you've done is you've basically asked somebody that, hey, here's a car, I've slashed all the tires, I've taken out the engine, drive it. And if you don't drive it, I'm going to ridicule you. You're going to lose your job. It's absolutely ridiculous and preposterous. That's not how things are supposed to happen. But unfortunately, a trend and a culture has came and brought things to this scenario. So what do we need to do? We need to look at leadership at school and we need to find out what type of leadership it is. Because make no mistake, leadership also needs to grow. At this time, the culture has become so strong of misbehavior. Parents are worried, especially if they're in the West and you're Muslims or you're religious and you're practicing, you're worried about your children's upbringing, you're worried about what type of Muslims they would be, you want to send them to Islamic schools at times, you want to send them to religious schools, you pay for private schools as well. What are you paying for? You're not just paying for grades and education, you're paying for tarbiyah, upbringing, character bringing, making someone into a stronger human being. We'll continue on with this right after this break. Stay tuned and keep thinking about it.
Welcome to City Pro Realty. We are 100% Canadian family-owned real estate brokerage. If you are thinking of buying or selling residential or commercial real estate, think of us. Call us. We are one-stop solution provider for your real estate needs. Our passion is real estate. Your success is our priority. Our commission plans to meet your budget. Your satisfaction is guaranteed. A family serving family. To search for sale properties and free reports, visit www.citypro.net.
Love that chicken from Popeyes. Love that chicken from Popeyes.
Fine Foods, now open in Barrhaven area, Ottawa. Pick up or dine in. Also available on Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes, and DoorDash.
$2020 का लाजवाब ऑफर, जहां हम 0% फाइनेंसिंग पर आपकी मनपसंद कार दे रहे हैं, फ्री विंटर टायर्स और साथ ही हम मुफ्त ऑयल चेंज भी दे रहे हैं, वो भी उम्र भर के लिए। अभी आएं और इस लाजवाब ऑफर का लुत्फ लें। जल्दी करें, आपका खुशामदीद हमारे आउटलेट में, जो कि 60 क्वींस प्लेट ड्राइव एट इंटरसेक्शन क्लोज टू हाईवे 27 एंड रेक्सडेल अपोजिट टू वुडबाइन रेस ट्रैक। जल्द से जल्द इस ऑफर का लुत्फ लें। आज ही कॉल करें सुनील अग्रवाल को 647-703-0218।
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome back to the show. Think about it. We left off talking about how cultures have changed within schools, and we left with the notion of how in the past a huge chunk and part of education was behavior and mannerism, which is practically non-existent today. And it's sad to see this. What can be done to fix this? From the time of children being hit with sticks and whatever by their principals and teachers to a time when there's no consequence at all. What have we done? Nobody's saying that the past was great or that those methods of disciplining were perfect. No. But we have to find a line in the middle. We have to find a path that could help us move forward in a way in which we have discipline, you have a focus on behavior, as well as the grades and everything else. Because at the end of the day, these children are going to grow up. They're going to go out to get jobs. They're going to be married. They're going to have their own children. They're going to have relationships with their neighbors. They're going to have relationships with their friends. They're going to go through all types of experiences. And if right now basic mannerism isn't taught, they might be in for a very big loss, and they might have a very difficult time in the future. So should the system change? I leave for you to think about that. Coming down to schools. Now with this transition, a lot of schools, they say that we cannot give marks or take away marks based on behavior or mannerism. The question is, why not? It's already an arbitrary system. An arbitrary system means man-made. Who told you that you have to get an A in math, science, and English in order to get into university? The Ministry of Education. Who told the Ministry of Education that these are the subjects that are required for studying engineering? They came up with it themselves. They looked at other countries doing it. Everything that we know is arbitrary, which means man-made. I'll tell you funny stories. I know people who are the heads, directors of language institutes, and they have degrees, masters, PhDs in botany, which means plants, in veterinarian sciences, which means taking care of animals. People who are surgeons, doctors, who went into the medical field, and then somehow life throws you all kinds of lemons and you make lemonade, you have different types of experiences, you have another calling that might show up. They're principals of schools, not related to their field. So everything is in fact arbitrary. In fact, if you ask your parents, for all those children who are watching this show, if you ask them, what good is a degree? People will tell you that a degree is your ticket into the practical world. It's your ticket into working. By all means, a lot of people who come and who have a talent of speaking and talking and holding presentations, not all of them have a degree in mass communications. Not all of them have a degree in journalism, broadcast journalism, diplomas or whatever it is, or public speaking. Some of them are naturally gifted with that. And so they find their way. And maybe their talents speak out for them, and because they speak out for them, they end up landing a job that benefits them, and they end up doing something that they're passionate about. So everything is arbitrary. So why can't grades for behavior be included? It's something to think about. We all want our children to be praised. We all want people to praise us too at times. A little bit of recognition and acknowledgement doesn't hurt anybody. We enjoy the fact when people say good things about us. We enjoy the fact when people give us respect. Then why can't we have a system that promotes that? Or a system that makes you into that respectable being? And that is what we need to focus on. With that, dear viewers, with that, I leave it for you to decide. Is the current culture worth it? Getting away without consequences? Was the previous culture better? Or was it so bad that we went completely opposite? And do we need to focus on upbringing? Do we need to focus on tarbiyah? Do we need to focus on making model citizens for the future? Most of us, mashallah, who watch this show as well, and myself, I'm a Muslim. We're dealing with the young Muslim ummah that's going to be dealing up with the future, taking it forward. We have a part to play. We're never going to end. It's not suffice and it's not justice, and no excuse is there for us to say that, oh, our time has passed. Our time is not passed. Until you die, your time hasn't passed. It's all of us, and it's up to all of us, and it's our responsibility to step up. And when we need a change, and when we need to set an example, it's all of us to do that. I leave it for you to decide. School culture. Does it need a change? Do we need to become better? Think about it. Thank you very much for tuning in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.